History often remembers its great leaders as marble statues, frozen in moments of triumph. But what if those same figures were also the most controversial? We are about to journey through the minds of 25 ancient rulers, from emperors to pharaohs, to examine the shocking, puzzling, and morally complex decisions that defined their reigns. This is a thrilling investigation into raw ambition, absolute power, and consequences that still echo in our world today. By the end, you will understand the true weight of a single command that can alter the course of civilization. We will see a Roman emperor wage war on the ocean itself, and a pharaoh who tried to erase 1,000 gods. What common thread of human nature do you think connects these monumental choices? Our first decision takes us to a land freshly forged from centuries of chaos. In 213 BCE, the newly unified China stood under the rule of its first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. He had conquered the warring states through sheer military force, but now he faced an even greater challenge, unifying the minds of his people. The empire was a patchwork of competing philosophies, loyalties, and historical records, each region clinging to its own past. The emperor saw this not as diversity, but as a direct threat to his absolute authority. His solution was as radical as it was ruthless, a decree that would echo through history as one of the most infamous acts of intellectual suppression. He ordered the burning of books, not just any books, but all historical records and philosophical texts from the conquered states that did not align with the Qin dynasty's own legalist ideology. Legalism was a philosophy of strict, impersonal laws and harsh punishments, the very system that had empowered Qin to victory. Works of poetry, history, and the teachings of rival schools, especially Confucianism, were to be confiscated and set ablaze. The goal was to erase the intellectual foundations of the old kingdoms, to make the people forget there had ever been a different way to live or think. Practical manuals on agriculture, medicine, and divination were spared, but the soul of a culture, its memory and its moral debates, was targeted for destruction. But the controversy deepens with an even darker allegation. Historical accounts, though debated by scholars for centuries, speak of the live burial of hundreds of Confucian scholars. The story goes that the emperor, enraged by scholars criticizing his policies and possibly attempting to hide texts, ordered them to be buried alive. Whether this event happened precisely as recorded or has been amplified by later historians hostile to the Qin, the symbolism is chilling. It represents the literal silencing of dissent, the physical elimination of intellectual opposition. The act sent a message of pure terror, that independent thought was not just discouraged, but punishable by a horrific death. So what was the motivation behind this cultural purge? Qin Shi Huang was not merely a tyrant indulging in cruelty. He was an architect of a new world, obsessed with creating a perfectly ordered, unified state. In his mind, multiple histories bred conflicting loyalties. Different philosophies created debate and weakened obedience. By burning the books, he sought to standardize thought, to create a single, streamlined cultural identity that was synonymous with the Qin state. He was building the first version of a totalitarian ideal, where the state controls not just actions, but memory and ideology itself. The controversy lies in the catastrophic cost. Countless historical chronicles, philosophical works, and literary treasures were lost forever, an irreplaceable void in human knowledge. While he may have achieved a temporary, fearful unity, he set a terrifying precedent that the path to power could be paved with the ashes of a civilization's memory. This was not just a political decision, it was an attempt to murder the past to control the future. The desire to control history is a terrifying ambition. But what happens when a leader seems to abandon his people in their darkest hour? In the year 64, a fire broke out in Rome. It began in the merchant shops around the Circus Maximus, and, fueled by wind and tightly packed wooden tenements, it exploded into an inferno. For 6 days and 7 nights, the flames raged, consuming entire districts of the ancient city. Panic was absolute, and the loss of life and property was catastrophic. Amid this chaos, a story was born that would forever stain the name of Emperor Nero. The historian Tacitus, writing decades later, recorded that Nero watched the spectacle from a safe distance, singing of the fall of Troy while accompanying himself on the lyre. Suetonius added the damning detail that Nero appeared on his private stage and performed a poem about the destruction of the city as it burned before his eyes. The image is indelible, an emperor so detached, so consumed by his own artistic vanity, that he would play music, or fiddle as the popular saying goes, while his capital turned to ash. This is the portrait of a monster, a man utterly indifferent to human suffering, but history is rarely that simple. The controversy lies in untangling fact from malicious fiction. Could this have been a genuine, if staggeringly tone-deaf, expression of his artistic soul? Nero fancied himself a great poet and musician, and he saw the world through a dramatic, Hellenistic lens. In a twisted way, he may have viewed the apocalyptic scene as a grand tragic performance, with himself as the narrator. It is a possibility that paints him not as evil, but as dangerously deluded. The more compelling argument, however, points to political sabotage. Nero had many powerful enemies in the Senate and among the old aristocracy. His extravagant spending and autocratic behavior had alienated the elite. The accounts of Tacitus and Suetonius, while invaluable, were written after Nero's death and fall from power, drawing on sources deeply hostile to him. The story of his musical performance provided the perfect metaphor for a decadent, irresponsible ruler. It was character assassination through narrative, turning a complex man into a simplistic symbol of tyranny. The aftermath of the fire only poured fuel on these rumors. To house the homeless, Nero opened his own gardens and ordered emergency grain supplies. But then he embarked on a project that seemed to confirm his critics' worst suspicions. He began construction of an enormous, opulent palace complex called the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, on a vast tract of land cleared by the fire. Its grounds included an artificial lake, sprawling vineyards, and forests stocked with exotic animals. The main dining room had a revolving ceiling. To the traumatized populace, it looked like the emperor was using their tragedy to build a pleasure palace. This fueled the persistent rumor that Nero himself had ordered the fire to be set to clear the land for his grand architectural vision. While most modern historians dismiss this as a myth, the perception was everything. The decision to build his golden dream atop the city's scars was a public relations catastrophe of epic proportions. It transformed him from a potentially misguided leader into a villain in the public imagination. The controversy of Nero's fiddle is not really about whether he played a song. It is about the perception of leadership in a moment of crisis. It asks a profound question when a society shatters. Does a leader have the right to pursue a personal vision, or must their every action be an act of communal solidarity? Nero failed that test spectacularly, and his legacy was sealed not just by flames, but by the story told about them. From the ashes of a burning empire, we journey to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, where a different kind of fire was lit. This was not a fire of destruction, but of a radical, all-consuming idea. Around 1353 BCE, a pharaoh named Amenhotep IV ascended the throne of Egypt. For over 1,000 years, Egyptian civilization had been built upon a complex, unshakable foundation of gods and goddesses, a pantheon led by the mighty Amun-Ra. The priesthood that served these gods wielded immense wealth and political power, rivaling that of the pharaohs themselves. Then, this new king did the unthinkable. He declared that the countless gods of Egypt were false. In their place, he proclaimed the worship of a single, supreme deity, the Aten, represented simply as the radiant disk of the sun. He changed his own name from Amenhotep, which meant Amun is satisfied, to Akhenaten, meaning effective for the Aten. This was not a quiet reform, it was a cultural revolution. Akhenaten moved the entire capital of Egypt from the ancient power center of Thebes to a barren stretch of desert on the east bank of the Nile. He called this new city Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, today known as Amarna. It was a city built from scratch, dedicated solely to his new god, but the controversy went far deeper than architecture. He ordered the names and images of the old gods, especially Amun, to be chiseled off temples and monuments across Egypt. The vast temples of the old gods were closed, their priesthoods disbanded, their income seized by the crown. For the average Egyptian, this was a cosmic earthquake. Their entire understanding of the world, their rituals for the afterlife, their local household gods, were suddenly declared illegal. Imagine your entire spiritual framework, the stories and traditions passed down for generations, being declared obsolete by royal decree. The motivation behind this staggering decision remains one of history's great puzzles. Was Akhenaten a true visionary, a monotheist millennia ahead of his time, experiencing a genuine religious revelation? The hymns he composed to the Aten are beautiful, praising the sun disk as the sole creator and sustainer of all life, a god of light and warmth accessible to all without the need of an intervening priesthood. This suggests a deeply personal faith, yet the political angle is equally compelling. The priesthood of Ammon had grown so powerful that it threatened the absolute authority of the pharaoh. By abolishing their god and seizing their lands and treasures, Akhenaten may have been executing the ultimate power play, crushing his only real rivals in a single, theological stroke. He replaced a system of shared power with one of direct, personal rule under the sole authority of the Aten, and by extension, himself as the god's sole intermediary on earth. The controversy this caused was total. It destabilized the economy, which was tied to temple estates. It alienated the entire priestly and administrative class. It confused and frightened the populace. When Akhenaten died, the reaction was swift and brutal. His name was systematically erased from monuments as if he had never existed. His capital at Amarna was abandoned to the desert sands. His son, the famous boy King Tutankhamun, whose original name was Tutankhaten, changed it to distance himself from his father's heresy and issued a decree restoring the old gods. The experiment was over. Akhenaten's decision stands as one of the most audacious attempts by a single individual to reshape the spiritual consciousness of an entire civilization. It asks us whether radical change, even from the very top, can ever truly succeed when it tries to erase 1,000 years of tradition overnight. The ruins of Amarna stand as a monument to a failed revolution, but sometimes a leader's controversial act is not about creating a new god, but about mocking the very idea of divine power. We arrive in Rome under the rule of Gaius, better known by his childhood nickname, Caligula, or Little Boots. His early reign was surprisingly moderate, but after a severe illness, the historical record darkens with tales of extravagance, cruelty, and sheer absurdity. Among these, one story towers above the rest for its sheer, baffling spectacle. Following a famously aborted military campaign to invade Britain, or perhaps after a grand, storm-wrecked bridge of boats he built across the Bay of Baiae, Emperor Caligula declared war. His enemy was not a foreign kingdom, but the sea itself. He marched his legions to the shoreline, lined them up in full battle formation, and ordered them to attack the waves. Trumpets sounded, swords were drawn, and soldiers charged into the water, slashing at the surf as if it were a living foe. The campaign, however, required spoils of victory. Caligula commanded his troops to gather seashells from the beach, filling their helmets and baskets with them. He called these shells the plunder of the ocean, loot taken from the defeated sea god Neptune himself. The legions then marched back to Rome in a bizarre triumph, displaying their cargo of shells and seaweed as the trophies of a conquered enemy. To the Roman mind, this was a profound and shocking disgrace. The Roman military was the sacred engine of empire, its discipline and dignity the bedrock of state power. To have legionaries, the conquerors of the world, reduced to collecting seashells on a madman's whim was an unforgivable humiliation. It made a mockery of the very concept of the triumph, Rome's highest military honor. So what are we to make of this? Was Caligula genuinely, clinically insane, so detached from reality that he believed the ocean was a sentient enemy? Ancient sources like Suetonius certainly wanted us to think so, painting him as a monster whose whims knew no logic. But another, more intriguing interpretation exists. This could have been a piece of devastating political satire, a calculated insult aimed at two pillars of Roman society, the Senate and the military elite. By declaring war on an intangible force and claiming a hollow victory, Caligula may have been mocking the entire machinery of Roman conquest and the empty honors the Senate bestowed. He was demonstrating, in the most grotesque way possible, that he could force the proud legions to do anything, even the utterly meaningless. He was showing the Senate that their traditions were his to pervert. There is also a slim possibility of a misunderstood religious context. Perhaps the act was an extreme form of a ritual called a devotio, where a commander would dedicate himself and the enemy to the gods of the underworld before a battle. Could attacking the sea have been an attempt to ritually punish Neptune for the failed bridge or the cancelled invasion? Even if so, the public performance was a catastrophic misjudgment. The controversy of the seashells is not about the act itself, but about what it revealed. It showcased a ruler who viewed the institutions of state as his personal toys, who held the dignity of his citizens and soldiers in absolute contempt. Whether it was madness, malice, or mockery, the decision permanently cemented his reputation as a tyrant. It proved that power, when utterly unchecked, could compel reality itself to bend to a farce. A ruler's fear can transform into a violence so profound it becomes legend. From the political theater of Rome, we travel to the arid hills of Judea near the end of the 1st century BCE, to a king whose name is synonymous with both grand architecture and profound cruelty, Herod the Great. According to the Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, asking where they could find the newborn king of the Jews. This news deeply troubled King Herod, and through his advisors, he learned the prophecies pointed to the town of Bethlehem. He secretly summoned the wise men, sending them to Bethlehem with instructions to report back the child's location, claiming he too wished to worship him. When the wise men, warned in a dream, departed for their own country by another route, Herod's reaction was swift and horrific. Realizing he had been tricked, he flew into a rage and issued a command that would echo for millennia. He ordered the massacre of all male children in Bethlehem and its surrounding districts who were 2 years old and under. This biblical event is known as the Massacre of the Innocents. To understand the weight of this story, we must first understand the man. Herod the Great was a client king of the Roman Empire, a brilliant but deeply paranoid ruler. He was a master builder, responsible for the expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem and the construction of the port city of Caesarea Maritima. Yet his reign was also marked by a brutal obsession with securing his power. He executed his own wife, Marian, out of jealousy and suspicion. He had several of his own sons killed for allegedly plotting against him. The Roman Emperor Augustus reportedly quipped that it was better to be Herod's pig than his son, a grim joke referencing Jewish dietary laws. This was a man for whom the elimination of potential rivals, even hypothetical ones, was a standard political practice. The historical controversy surrounding the massacre of the innocents is intense. The event is not mentioned by the Jewish historian Josephus, who provides a detailed account of Herod's reign and his many other atrocities. For some scholars, this absence is critical evidence that the event, as described, may not have occurred on a scale large enough to be recorded in secular histories. Bethlehem was a small village. The number of male infants affected might have been tragically small, perhaps a dozen or so. A horrifying but locally contained crime that could have been lost amid Herod's larger, more politically significant murders. For others, the story's power lies in its symbolic truth. It perfectly encapsulates the character of Herod as history knows him, a tyrant so consumed by fear that he would commit any act to protect his throne. The decision, whether historical fact or powerful narrative, aligns seamlessly with the profile of a ruler who saw threats in his own family and would certainly not hesitate to eliminate a prophesied peasant child. The lasting impact of this story, however, is undeniable. It became a foundational element of Christian tradition, representing the stark confrontation between worldly, tyrannical power and a vulnerable, divine promise. It is depicted in countless masterpieces of art, from the anguished frescoes of Giotto to the dramatic paintings of Peter Paul Rubens, forever freezing that moment of maternal terror and royal savagery. The Massacre of the Innocents transcended its specific historical moment to become the ultimate symbol of a state's willingness to sacrifice its most innocent to preserve its own power. It asks a haunting question that resonates far beyond ancient Judea. How far will a fearful leader go to extinguish a single, flickering threat? And what is the true cost of that fear written in the lives of the blameless? Fear could drive a king to murder infants, but what power could convince an emperor to embrace a persecuted faith? In the year 313, the Roman Empire was tearing itself apart in a bloody civil war. Two men vied for the title of Augustus in the West, Constantine and his rival Maxentius. On the eve of the decisive battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine experienced a vision. According to the historian Eusebius, Constantine looked up at the sun and saw a cross of light above it, and with it the Greek words, "In this sign, conquer." That night he dreamed that Christ himself appeared and instructed him to use the symbol, the Chi-Rho, as a safeguard for his army. The next day, Constantine had his soldiers paint the Christian symbol on their shields. He won a stunning victory, and Maxentius drowned in the Tiber River. This moment of divine intervention, real or imagined, set the stage for one of the most consequential decisions in Western history. Shortly after securing power, Constantine, together with his eastern co-emperor Licinius, issued the Edict of Milan. This was not a law demanding everyone become Christian. Instead, it was a revolutionary decree of religious tolerance. It proclaimed that all people within the empire were free to follow whatever religion they chose, and it specifically ordered the restitution of all property confiscated from Christian communities during the earlier persecutions. For the first time in nearly 3 centuries, Christianity was not just tolerated, it was legal and protected by the state. The controversy lies in the emperor's heart. Was Constantine's conversion a genuine spiritual awakening, a sincere belief that the Christian God had granted him victory and dominion? His mother Helena was a devout Christian, and his later life showed deep involvement in church affairs, even presiding over the Council of Nicaea to settle theological disputes. He built magnificent churches, like the original St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Yet, the political calculation is impossible to ignore. The empire was fractured, its traditional pagan religions failing to provide a unifying force. Christianity, despite persecution, had grown into a disciplined, organized network that spanned all social classes. By aligning himself with this rising moral force, Constantine could tap into a powerful new source of loyalty and administrative talent. He wasn't just adopting a religion, he was recruiting a ready-made infrastructure to help govern a crumbling world. His decision was a masterstroke of political branding, merging divine mandate with imperial authority. The consequences of this choice reshaped civilization. Christianity moved rapidly from the catacombs to the palace. The church gained immense wealth, legal privileges, and eventually, the power to suppress the very pagan religions the edict had once protected. The Roman state began to transform, its laws and values slowly intertwining with Christian doctrine. This fusion gave birth to the concept of Christendom, setting the ideological foundation for the entire medieval world. Constantine's decision created a template for the alliance of throne and altar that would dominate Europe for over 1,000 years. So, was it faith or strategy? Perhaps it was the most powerful kind of decision, one where genuine belief and cold political necessity became indistinguishable. He didn't just save a religion, he harnessed its energy to forge a new kind of empire, proving that the most controversial choices are often those that change the very soul of a civilization. Constantine's fusion of faith and empire created a new orthodoxy. But what happens when that orthodoxy decides its ancient rivals must finally be silenced? In the year 529, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian issued an edict that would close a door on 1,000 years of thought. His target was not a rebellion or a foreign army, but a school. He ordered the permanent closure of the Platonic Academy in Athens, the very institution founded by Plato nearly 900 years earlier. Imagine a university that had operated continuously since the time of the ancient Greeks, through the rise and fall of Alexander, through the entire Roman Republic and Empire, a beacon of rational inquiry that had nurtured minds like Aristotle and Plotinus. With one decree, Justinian extinguished its flame. The context was an empire deeply committed to Christian unity. Justinian was a formidable ruler, obsessed with restoring the territorial and spiritual grandeur of Rome. He had just reconquered vast swaths of the Western Mediterranean, and he was busy codifying Roman law into a monumental legal corpus. But his vision of a perfect, unified realm had no room for intellectual dissent, especially of the pagan variety. The Academy, though a shadow of its former self, remained the symbolic heart of pagan Greek philosophy. Its teachers, the last guardians of Plato and Aristotle's traditions, were seen not just as holdouts of an old religion, but as potential seeds of heresy and opposition. In a state where the emperor was God's vice-regent on earth, a competing school of thought was a threat to the very fabric of his divinely ordained order. The fate of the Academy's last philosophers is shrouded in some legend, but the common story is poignant. According to the historian Agathias, 7 of the remaining scholars, including the head of the school, Damascius, chose exile over submission. They are said to have sought refuge in the court of the Persian king Khosrow I, a ruler known for his interest in philosophy and religious tolerance. It's a powerful image, these last heirs of Socrates and Plato packing their scrolls and fleeing across the eastern frontier, carrying the embers of classical thought into a foreign land. While they eventually returned under a treaty, the Academy itself was gone forever, its property likely confiscated, its halls falling silent. The controversy of this decision burns as brightly today as it did then. For many, Justinian's act is the symbolic end of the classical world, the moment the light of free rational inquiry was snuffed out by the demands of religious dogma. It is painted as the beginning of an intellectual dark age, where philosophy became merely the handmaiden of theology, and asking certain questions became dangerous. The closure represents the triumph of faith over reason, of authority over debate. It's seen as a cultural catastrophe, a willful amputation of a vital part of humanity's intellectual heritage. But was it merely that? Another perspective suggests this was less about a war on knowledge and more about the brutal pragmatics of state building. Justinian was consolidating a fragile, fractured empire. He was fighting theological battles on multiple fronts, against monophysites and other Christian sects. Allowing a prestigious pagan institution to operate in plain sight was an open challenge to his project of a unified, Orthodox Christian identity. The Academy's closure was a clear signal, a demonstration that there was no room for a competing intellectual authority outside the church and the state that supported it. It was a necessary, if ruthless, step in his grand plan to forge a cohesive civilization from the fragments of the old Roman world. So, do we mourn the lost dialogues of potential philosophers, or do we acknowledge the brutal logic of an emperor forging a new world? Justinian's decision forces us to ask whether the stability of a society can ever justify the closing of a school, and what truly dies when a place dedicated solely to questions is told it must provide only approved answers. The silencing of a school is an intellectual death, but the struggle for a throne demands a far more visceral kind of silence. In 7th century China, a woman named Wu Zetian achieved the impossible, ascending to become the only female emperor in the nation's history. Her path to the Dragon Throne was a masterclass in political survival, a journey so steeped in accusation and blood that it forever divides historians. Was she a ruthless monster who stopped at nothing, or a strategic genius navigating the deadliest game imaginable? Her story begins not as a princess, but as a concubine. Entering the court of Emperor Taizong as a young teenager, she was given the name Mei, meaning charming. After his death, by tradition, she should have spent the rest of her life in a convent. Instead, she caught the eye of the new emperor, Gaozong, and was brought back to the palace as a lower-ranking consort. This was her first, breathtaking defiance of protocol. From this precarious position, she began her climb. The imperial harem was a snake pit of ambition, where consorts and their families vied for the emperor's favor, hoping their son would be named heir. Wu's primary rival was Empress Wang, the emperor's official wife. The turning point, and the source of the most infamous accusation against Wu, involves the death of her own infant daughter. The historical records state that Wu's daughter was found dead in her crib shortly after a visit from Empress Wang. Wu Zetian accused the empress of murdering the child out of jealousy. Emperor Gaozong, convinced by Wu's portrayal of the event, deposed Empress Wang. Wu Zetian was elevated to empress in her place. Later, both the former Empress Wang and another high-ranking consort, Xiao, were imprisoned on further charges. They were allegedly subjected to brutal mutilation, their hands and feet cut off, and left to die in a wine vat. Wu was said to have remarked, "Now these two witches can get drunk to their bones." Whether she directly ordered the atrocity or her supporters carried it out to please her, the event cemented her reputation for merciless cruelty. Her purge did not stop in the harem. To secure her position and later, the throne itself for her own lineage, she systematically eliminated members of the imperial Lai family who stood in her way. Princes, ministers, and scholars who opposed her were exiled, forced to commit suicide, or executed on charges of treason. She cultivated a network of secret police and informants to root out dissent, creating an atmosphere of fear that ensured compliance. So how do we judge this bloody ascent? The controversy cuts to the core of power and gender. In the rigid Confucian framework, a woman's place was subordinate. For a woman to not only rule but found her own Zhou dynasty, she had to break every single rule. Her male contemporaries and later historians, writing from a deeply patriarchal perspective, naturally painted her actions as the ultimate unnatural treachery. The story of the murdered infant became the perfect symbol of a woman so power-hungry she would sacrifice her own maternal instincts. Yet, consider the system she was in. The Tang court was a lethal arena where elimination was the standard political practice for men and women alike. Every emperor before her had cemented power through similar purges of brothers and uncles. Wu Zetian was playing the same game, but from a position of profound structural weakness. Any perceived softness would have been her end. Her political achievements are often overshadowed by the tales of her cruelty. As emperor, she proved to be a remarkably capable administrator. She lowered taxes, boosted agricultural production, and stabilized the empire. She reformed the civil service examination system, opening government positions to a wider pool of talent based on merit rather than aristocratic birth, a move that strengthened the state for centuries. She patronized Buddhism and the arts. In many ways, she was an effective, even visionary, ruler. The controversy of Wu Zetian, therefore, is a mirror. Do we judge her by the brutal means she used to seize power, means that were commonplace for male emperors? Or do we judge her by the competent and prosperous reign that followed? Her story forces us to ask whether a system designed to exclude someone must be shattered with extraordinary violence, and if so, who truly bears the blame for the bloodshed, the individual or the impenetrable walls they had to tear down? The bloody calculus of securing a throne is one thing, but what of the conqueror who destroys the very prize he has won? In the spring of 330 BCE, Alexander the Great stood at the absolute peak of his power. He had just defeated the last Achaemenid emperor, Darius III, and his army now occupied the ceremonial heart of the Persian Empire, the magnificent capital of Persepolis. This was no ordinary city. It was a breathtaking testament to imperial wealth and artistry, built on a vast stone terrace with monumental staircases, colossal columns, and palaces adorned with intricate reliefs. Here was the accumulated treasure of 2 centuries, the very symbol of Persian supremacy that Greek cities like Athens had lived in fear of for generations. Alexander allowed his weary troops to loot the city's immense riches, a reward for their epic campaign. But then, after several months of occupation, something far more permanent happened. During a lavish banquet to celebrate the victory, with wine flowing freely, the mood shifted. The Athenian courtesan Thais, a companion of one of Alexander's generals, is said to have given a stirring speech. She spoke of the Persian king Xerxes burning Athens a century and a half earlier and urged Alexander to let her, a woman, set fire to the royal palace in revenge. Flushed with drink and perhaps swayed by the theatrical appeal, Alexander seized a torch. He led a procession through the palace, and the great wooden ceilings of the Epadana and the treasury were set ablaze. The fire quickly spread, engulfing the complex in an inferno that reduced much of the world's most splendid architecture to blackened ruins. Was this a moment of drunken impulsiveness, a catastrophic error fueled by wine and the provocations of a companion? The ancient sources present it as a spontaneous act of revelry gone terribly wrong, a night of passion that erased a masterpiece. Yet, Alexander was a master of symbolic gesture. He knew the power of an image. The burning of Persepolis was the most potent image imaginable. It was not just a building that burned. it was the very idea of the Achaemenid Empire. For the Persians watching, it was the ultimate desecration, a signal that their gods had abandoned them and their ancient line of kings was irrevocably broken. For the Greeks in Alexander's army, especially those from cities like Athens, it was a long-awaited vengeance, a closing of the historical circle. This act stands in stark, controversial contrast to Alexander's broader policy. Before and after Persepolis, he pursued a strategy of fusion, adopting Persian dress, encouraging his officers to marry Persian noblewomen, and integrating Persian troops into his army. He sought to rule as a successor to the Achaemenids, not merely as their Greek destroyer. So why burn the crown jewel? Perhaps the fire was a necessary, brutal punctuation mark. It was the final, undeniable period at the end of the sentence of Persian dominance. It showed his own men, who might have grown comfortable with Persian luxury, that the war was truly over and their mission of conquest was complete. It was a calculated message to the entire world, written in flame, that a new era had begun and it would be built upon the ashes of the old order. The controversy lies in the staggering cultural loss. This was not a military target, but a repository of art, history, and architectural genius. In one night, a treasure of human civilization was vandalized. It forces us to ask whether the symbolic needs of a conqueror, the thirst for revenge, or the heat of a single moment can ever justify the annihilation of beauty that belongs not to a king, but to humanity itself. Alexander's torch did more than burn wood and stone. It ignited a debate about the true cost of victory that still smolders today. Alexander's torch left ruins to mark a new era, but in Rome, a century later, another sun cult would rise with a leader who tried to force a new god upon the ancient capital with bewildering speed. In the year 218, a 14-year-old boy named Varius Avidius Bassianus became Roman emperor. He is known to history as Elagabalus, named for the Syrian sun god Elagabal, whose high priest he had been since childhood. Raised in the temple city of Emesa, his entire world was the ritual worship of this conical black stone, a meteorite believed to embody the deity. When political intrigue placed him on the throne, he did not come to Rome as a politician or a general, but as a fanatical priest-king on a divine mission. His first and most shocking decision was to attempt a religious revolution. He ordered the sacred stone of Elagabalus to be transported from Syria to Rome with immense ceremony. Upon its arrival, he constructed a lavish new temple on the Palatine Hill, right at the heart of imperial power, and declared his god the supreme deity of the Roman pantheon, placing Elagabal above even Jupiter, the king of the gods. He demanded that all other gods, including Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, be considered merely servants or attendants of his sun god. This was an assault on the very spiritual foundation of Rome. The Roman state religion was a conservative, contractual pact with the gods to ensure the safety of the state. Elagabalus treated it like a personal cult, imposing foreign, ecstatic rites that horrified the Roman elite. He would dance around the altar in lavish Syrian robes, his face painted, performing rituals that seemed alien and effeminate to traditional Roman sensibilities. The controversy deepened with his personal life, which flouted every convention. He entered into multiple marriages, each more scandalous than the last. One was to a Vestal virgin, a priestess sworn to absolute chastity for 30 years. The violation of this sacred office was not just a personal scandal, it was a direct attack on Roman religious law, an act considered to bring a curse upon the entire city. He was also reported to have married a man, a charioteer named Hierocles, and referred to him as his husband. To the Senate and the people of Rome, these actions were not merely eccentric, they were signs of a profound moral sickness that threatened the Pax Deorum, the peace with the gods. His rule seemed a continuous performance of contempt for tradition. He appointed advisors based on the size of their anatomy rather than their experience. He served dinners made of precious stones or food dyed blue. He is said to have released clouds of rose petals from a reversible ceiling to smother his dinner guests, not out of malice, but as a bizarre form of entertainment. So what are we to make of this teenage emperor? Was Elagabalus a religious visionary, genuinely convinced his universal sun god was the one true deity destined to unify the empire's diverse cults. Some modern interpretations suggest he was an early monotheist, trying to impose a unifying solar theology on a fragmented religious landscape. Or was he simply a mentally unstable youth, corrupted by absolute power, and utterly unprepared for the brutal realities of Roman politics? His priestly upbringing offers a key. He was not trained in law, administration, or military command. He was trained in ritual. He approached the empire as if it were his temple, and the Senate and people were his congregation, expected to follow his divine lead without question. He fundamentally misunderstood the nature of Roman power, which required at least a facade of respect for tradition and shared authority with the Senate. His reign became a byword for decadence and instability, not because he was the worst tyrant, but because he was an incomprehensible one. His decisions made no sense within the Roman framework. He was not cruel in the methodical way of other bad emperors. He was absurd, and in a system built on gravitas and order, absurdity was perhaps the most dangerous threat of all. The Praetorian Guard finally had enough. After just 4 years of chaotic rule, they murdered Elagabalus and his mother, dragged their bodies through the streets, and threw them into the Tiber River. The Black Stone was sent back to Syria. The experiment was erased. His legacy is a stark warning of what happens when a leader, blinded by a singular personal truth, tries to force an entire civilization to worship at an altar it does not understand. The murder of a teenage emperor revealed Rome's deep fear of the unfamiliar. But in Egypt, a pharaoh made a calculated gamble to invite the foreigner inside. After centuries of fractured rule and occupation by the Nubians and then the Assyrians, Egypt in the 7th century BCE was a shadow of its former imperial self. A prince of the city of Sais, named Psamtik I, saw an opportunity to reunify the Nile Valley under native Egyptian rule. He had Assyrian backing, but to achieve his dream, he needed an army loyal only to him. His solution was as pragmatic as it was unprecedented. He hired mercenaries, but not from neighboring lands. He sent recruiting agents across the Mediterranean to the warrior cultures of Greece and Caria, in modern-day Turkey. These were not just a few hired swords. This was a deliberate, large-scale importation of foreign military power. He settled these Greek and Carian fighters in strategic camps in the Nile Delta, creating a professional, alien force at the very gateway to Egypt. With this new army, Psamtik launched his campaign. He methodically defeated the other local rulers, the so-called kinglets, who controlled different parts of Egypt under Assyrian oversight. His Greek hoplites, with their heavy bronze armor, tight phalanx formations, and long thrusting spears, were a terrifying and effective innovation on Egyptian battlefields. Within a decade, Psamtik had expelled the Assyrian garrisons and reunified the two lands, founding the prosperous 26th dynasty, also known as the Sate Renaissance. His mercenaries had delivered the throne, but the decision did not end with the last battle. To secure their loyalty and service, Psamtik had to make them a permanent part of Egypt. He granted them land, allowing them to settle and raise families. He established the port city of Naucratis in the Delta as a designated Greek trading colony, the first of its kind in Egypt. This wasn't just a market, it was a semi-autonomous Greek city on Egyptian soil, with its own temples to Greek gods and its own system of governance. It became a bustling funnel through which Greek pottery, wine, and ideas flowed into Egypt, and Egyptian grain and luxury goods flowed out to the Greek world. The military success was undeniable. Egypt enjoyed a period of renewed stability, wealth, and artistic flourishing. Yet, the controversy simmered beneath this renaissance. To many priests, nobles, and traditionalists, Psamtik's policy was a profound betrayal of Ma'at, the sacred cosmic order. For millennia, the pharaoh was the defender of Egypt's unique, divinely blessed civilization against the chaotic foreign Nine Bows. Now, the pharaoh himself had planted those very bows at the heart of the kingdom. The sight of Greek soldiers in their strange armor patrolling the delta, the sound of their foreign tongues in the streets, the smell of sacrifices to Zeus and Apollo at Naucratis, all felt like a cultural contamination. The traditional military class, whose identity was tied to service to a divine Egyptian king, was sidelined by professional foreigners who fought not for Pharaoh's divinity, but for his silver. The controversy asks a difficult question about national survival. Was Psamtik a visionary who used necessary tools to rescue Egypt from oblivion, or did he, in saving the body of the state, unknowingly infect its soul? His decision created a dangerous precedent. It proved that foreign troops could decide an Egyptian throne. Generations later, this lesson would be learned tragically well. When the Persian Empire invaded in 525 BCE, it was largely the Greek mercenaries in Egyptian service who defected, leading directly to Egypt's defeat and conquest. The policy that had reunified Egypt ultimately made it more vulnerable, demonstrating that the sword you hire can always be turned against you. Psamtik's gamble secured a century of independence, but it opened a door to the wider world that Egypt would never, and could never, fully close again. The mercenaries at the gate secured a throne, but for another ruler, security meant building walls, both physical and psychological. In the year 26, the Roman Emperor Tiberius, then in his late 60s, made a startling choice. He left the city of Rome, the seat of power for centuries, and withdrew to the secluded, cliff-bound island of Capri. He would never return to the capital, ruling the vast Roman Empire from this sun-drenched retreat for the final 11 years of his life. This was not a vacation, it was a permanent retreat. To understand why, we must look at the man. Tiberius was a reluctant emperor, a grim and capable military commander thrust into the role by the machinations of his predecessor, Augustus. He was deeply private, introverted, and profoundly uncomfortable with the sycophantic, backstabbing theater of Roman politics. The Senate, in his view, was a nest of hypocrites, and the Roman populace was fickle and demanding. His decision to leave was likely born from a deep, visceral weariness, a desire to escape the crushing burden of public performance and the constant, draining intrigue. He likely saw it as a practical move, a way to govern with clear-eyed detachment, free from the daily noise. But an emperor cannot vanish without creating a vacuum. In Rome, that vacuum was filled by a man named Lucius Aelius Sejanus, the prefect, or commander, of the Praetorian Guard. With the emperor absent, Sejanus became the most visible face of power in the capital. He skillfully positioned himself as Tiberius's indispensable right hand, feeding the emperor's natural suspicions and, according to the historian Tacitus, systematically removing potential rivals. He orchestrated treason trials against senators and members of the imperial family, using the emperor's remote authority to purge his enemies. The atmosphere in Rome grew thick with fear. No one knew who might be accused next. Informers flourished, and the once vibrant political life of the Senate curdled into silent compliance. Tiberius, receiving reports from Sejanus in his island fortress, became increasingly paranoid, seeing conspiracies in every shadow, a state of mind his prefect expertly cultivated. This is the core of the controversy. Was Tiberius's retreat a wise, if cynical, strategy for self-preservation and efficient rule? From Capri, he could issue edicts and make appointments without being swayed by mobs or senatorial factions. He avoided the riots and public disputes that plagued city governance. In this light, his isolation was a form of extreme administrative streamlining. Yet, the opposing view is far more damning. By removing himself, Tiberius committed an unforgivable abdication of the emperor's most fundamental duty, to be present. The Roman emperor was not just an administrator, he was the pater patrii, the father of the country. His physical presence in the city was a symbol of stability, justice, and accessibility. His absence created a moral and political black hole that allowed a predator like Sejanus to operate unchecked. Tiberius failed to provide the oversight that could have prevented the reign of terror that gripped Rome. He allowed the machinery of the state to become an instrument of private vengeance and tyranny. His physical distance bred psychological distance, making him an aloof and uncaring figure to his people. And then there were the rumors. From the isolation of Capri, stories began to leak back to Rome, tales so salacious they would define his legacy for centuries. The biographer Suetonius wrote of elaborate, debauched parties, of sexual perversions, and of young children, termed minnows, who would swim between his legs in the pool to nibble at him. Whether these stories contained a grain of truth or were wholesale fabrications by his enemies is almost irrelevant. They flourished in the dark soil of his absence. With no one in Rome to see the real man, the public imagination painted a monster. The emperor became a phantom of depravity, a crazed old man indulging every hidden vice in his island fortress. This was the ultimate cost of his decision. By leaving, he surrendered control of his own story. The controversy of Tiberius on Capri forces us to ask a difficult question about leadership. Can a ruler govern effectively from a place of personal peace? Or does true stewardship require immersion in the messy, dangerous, and exhausting heart of the realm he is sworn to protect? His retreat may have saved his sanity, but it doomed his reputation and, for a time, the spirit of Rome itself. Gold could not buy clarity from the gods. In the 6th century BCE, King Croesus of Lydia ruled a realm of legendary wealth, his name itself becoming synonymous with riches. His kingdom in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, was the first to mint pure gold and silver coins, making him the banker of the ancient world. Yet, across his eastern border, a new and formidable power was rising, the Persian Empire under its brilliant and ambitious king, Cyrus the Great. Watching Cyrus consolidate his conquests, Croesus grew deeply anxious. He decided to seek divine guidance before taking action, sending lavish gifts to the most famous oracle in Greece, the oracle at Delphi. The question was momentous: should he wage a preemptive war against Persia? The Pythia, the priestess through whom the god Apollo spoke, gave a reply that has echoed through history for its cruel ambiguity. She declared that if Croesus attacked the Persians, he would destroy a great empire. To Croesus, the meaning seemed gloriously clear. The oracle was promising his victory, foretelling the destruction of the Persian Empire. Emboldened by this divine endorsement, he mobilized his formidable army and crossed the Halys River, the boundary between Lydia and Persia, launching his war. The early skirmishes were inconclusive, but the decisive battle came at Thymbra. Cyrus, a military innovator, used a clever tactic, placing his baggage camels in the front lines. The unfamiliar sight and smell of the camels spooked the Lydian cavalry horses, throwing Croesus's elite forces into disarray. The Lydian army was routed. Croesus retreated to his capital, Sardis, but Cyrus pursued him relentlessly, laid siege to the city, and captured it. The fabulously wealthy king was taken prisoner. The great empire that was destroyed was not Persia, but his own. The Lydian kingdom, with all its gold, ceased to exist, absorbed into Cyrus's burgeoning empire. The controversy of Croesus's decision is a masterclass in the perils of hearing only what you want to hear. He fell victim to a profound and fatal confirmation bias. The oracle's prophecy was a perfect trap, a riddle that could only be solved in hindsight. Croesus, confident in his own power and destiny, assumed the empire to be destroyed was his enemy's. He never considered the possibility that the great empire in question was his own. This story became the ancient world's quintessential parable about hubris, the danger of excessive pride before the gods. It was not just a military miscalculation, it was a spiritual one. He believed he could purchase a favorable prophecy with his gold, and then interpret it in the way most flattering to his ambitions. The gods, as the Greeks understood them, were not so easily managed. Their messages were often veiled, designed to test human wisdom and humility. Croesus failed that test spectacularly. Later legends say that as he stood upon a pyre, about to be burned alive by Cyrus, he cried out the name of the wise Athenian lawgiver Solon, who had once warned him that no man could be judged happy until his life was over. Cyrus, moved by this, spared his life and kept him as an advisor. Whether true or not, this ending reinforces the moral that wealth and power are fleeting, and fortune's wheel can turn in an instant. Croesus's war was not merely a bad strategic gamble. It was a failure to understand the fundamental unpredictability of fate. His story asks us a timeless question when we seek guidance for a momentous choice. How can we be sure we are listening to the answer, and not just the echo of our own desperate hopes? The wealth of Croesus vanished in the smoke of a misinterpreted prophecy, but another king would soon wield faith as a weapon to extinguish an even brighter flame. In the year 393, the Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued a sweeping edict that would silence an echo of 1,000 years. He banned all pagan festivals across the empire. Among the countless rituals and celebrations outlawed was one that stood above all others, the ancient Olympic Games. For over a millennium, since 776 BCE, athletes from every Greek city-state had gathered every 4 years at Olympia to compete in the name of Zeus. It was more than a sporting event, it was a sacred truce, a pan-Hellenic pilgrimage that paused wars and unified a fractious people through shared reverence and physical excellence. Theodosius's order did not just cancel the games, it terminated a tradition that was older than Rome itself. To understand this decision, you must see the empire Theodosius inherited. It was a realm tearing itself apart along religious lines. For decades, emperors had vacillated between tolerating paganism and suppressing it. Theodosius was a devout Nicene Christian, determined to finally unify the empire under a single Orthodox faith. In 380, he had issued the Edict of Thessalonica, making Nicene Christianity the sole legitimate religion of the state. His subsequent bans on pagan sacrifice and temple worship were logical extensions of this policy, steps to dismantle the old religion's public infrastructure. The Olympic Games, with their sacrifices to Zeus, their statues of gods, and their roots deep in pagan myth, were an undeniable stronghold of the old world. They could not be allowed to continue, so the games were stopped. The temples at Olympia fell into disrepair. The sacred olive groves grew wild. The rhythmic cycle of 4 years, the Olympiad, which Greeks had used to date historical events, simply ceased to be a living calendar. A direct, vibrant link to the classical past was severed. The controversy here is a collision of two monumental forces, faith and cultural memory. From Theodosius's perspective, this was not vandalism, it was purification. The empire was God's vessel now, and allowing a festival dedicated to a false god to continue was an affront to divine order and a danger to the souls of his subjects. He was cutting out a cancerous remnant of idolatry to save the body of the empire. It was a necessary, surgical strike for the soul of Christendom. To others, then and now, it was an act of profound cultural violence. The Olympics were not merely a religious rite. They were a celebration of human potential, of peace through competition, of a shared Hellenic identity that transcended politics. By banning them, Theodosius did not just suppress paganism, he suppressed a foundational ideal of Western civilization. He traded a living, breathing tradition for doctrinal purity, sacrificing 1,000 years of shared history on the altar of theological conformity. The irony, of course, is staggering. 15 centuries later, the Olympic Games were revived in their modern form, becoming a global symbol of unity and athleticism that Theodosius could never have imagined. The flame he extinguished was relit, not for Zeus, but for all humanity. This decision forces us to ask a difficult question. Can the advancement of a new, unifying truth ever justify the deliberate erasure of an ancient one? Is progress sometimes built upon a foundation of forgotten beauty? And if so, what do we truly gain, and what is forever lost in the ashes of the old gods? A wall of stone now rose where the gods of Olympus had fallen. In the year 122, the Emperor Hadrian arrived in the distant, rain-swept province of Britannia. He brought with him a vision not of conquest, but of containment. His order was to build a barrier, a massive fortification of stone and turf stretching 73 Roman miles, from the River Tyne in the east to the Solway Firth in the west. This was not a temporary camp, but a permanent statement carved into the landscape itself, Hadrian's Wall. Its scale was staggering, a complex military zone featuring the wall itself, a deep ditch to the north, a fortified road behind it, and a sequence of mile castles, turrets, and large garrison forts. It was the most heavily fortified border in the entire Roman Empire. The strategic rationale seemed impeccable. For decades, the legions had tried and failed to subdue the fierce tribes north of the province, the people the Romans called the Picts, or the Painted Ones. These tribes excelled at lightning raids, striking Roman settlements, and then vanishing back into the misty highlands. Hadrian's Wall was designed to solve this problem with cold, Roman efficiency. It controlled all movement across the frontier. People and goods could only pass through its guarded gates, allowing for taxation and surveillance. It provided a secure base for patrols and a rapid communication system via its turrets. Most of all, it was a psychological and physical deterrent, a clear, unmovable line that said, "This far and no further." It defined the absolute limit of Roman power. But the construction of this immense barrier was deeply controversial. To its supporters, it was a masterpiece of military engineering and pragmatic governance. Hadrian was a practical emperor who recognized that the empire had grown too vast to endlessly expand. The wall represented a shift from aggressive expansion to smart consolidation, securing what was valuable rather than chasing costly, ungovernable territory. It was a declaration of strength, a demonstration that Rome could impose its order on the very geography of a land. For the soldiers stationed there, from places as far away as Spain, Syria, and North Africa, it was a tough but stable posting, a frontier where discipline and routine could hold the wilderness at bay. To its critics, however, the wall was a monument to imperial failure. It was an admission that Roman military might have met its match in the guerrilla tactics of the northern tribes. Instead of defeating the enemy, Rome had simply turned its back on them, building a colossal fence. Some saw it as a symbol of stagnation, the moment the vibrant, expanding republic of old finally hardened into a defensive, bureaucratic empire. The financial cost was enormous, consuming legions of soldiers as builders for years, resources that could have been used elsewhere. And as a static defense, it had a critical weakness: it only worked if the enemy respected the line. A determined force could go around it by sea, or mass to overwhelm a single section. The impact on the local populations was profound and complex. For the Celtic tribes to the south, within the province of Britannia, the wall was a stark reminder of their subjugation, but also a source of relative security and economic opportunity. Settlements grew around the forts, with markets catering to the soldiers. For the tribes to the north, it was an insult and an obstruction. It cut across ancient grazing lands and trade routes, dividing communities and families. It transformed them from potential subjects into permanent outsiders, defining them as the barbarians beyond the pale. The wall did not just keep people out, it created the very idea of two separate Britons, one Roman, one wild. Hadrian's Wall still stands today, a ruin now, but its legacy is immense. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a testament to Roman engineering, but more than that, it remains a powerful symbol of division. It makes us ask, does building a wall to create security actually create a more permanent state of hostility? Does drawing a line on a map solve a problem, or does it simply make that line the problem itself? Hadrian sought to bring order to the edge of the world, but in doing so, he cast a long shadow that asked whether empires are ultimately defined by what they build, or by what they choose to shut out. While Hadrian's Wall was a declaration of imperial limits, another emperor would try to tear down a different kind of boundary, one not of stone, but of faith. In the year 361, a man named Julian became the sole ruler of Rome. He is remembered by a single, powerful label: Julian the Apostate, the one who turned away. His story is a paradox wrapped in a secret. Raised strictly Christian in a court where his own family had been murdered, he was educated by some of the finest Christian tutors of the age. Yet, in the quiet of libraries and under the influence of pagan philosophers, he experienced a profound intellectual and spiritual conversion. He came to adore the old gods of Greece and Rome, the poetry of Homer, and the logic of Plato. When power finally fell to him, he made a decision that shocked the empire. He would attempt to reverse its Christian revolution. This was not a minor policy shift. It was a conscious, sweeping campaign to restore paganism as the dominant force in Roman life. He reopened the ancient temples that had been closed by his predecessors. He restored their lands and incomes, funding the revival of animal sacrifices and public rituals that had not been seen in decades. He stripped the Christian church of the privileges and tax exemptions it had gained, and he even wrote lengthy, biting polemics attacking Christian doctrine, mocking it as a belief for the ignorant. But Julian was clever. He did not launch a bloody persecution. Instead, he used a more subtle, and in some ways more dangerous, tactic. He framed his restoration as an act of philosophical tolerance and a return to Rome's true cultural roots. He argued that the old pagan ways, with their many paths to the divine, were inherently more open and intellectually respectable than what he saw as the rigid, exclusive dogma of Christianity. The controversy surrounding Julian is intense and deeply personal. To his admirers, he was the last, brilliant defender of classical civilization. He was an intellectual emperor, a philosopher king trying to rescue the beautiful, complex world of myth and reason from the encroaching darkness of what he considered superstition. He is seen as a tragic hero of tolerance, advocating for a pluralistic society where many gods could coexist, standing against the rising tide of religious absolutism. His effort is painted as a noble, if doomed, rearguard action to save 1,000 years of culture. To his detractors, both then and now, Julian was something else entirely, a dangerous reactionary, a man trying to force the tide of history to flow backwards. Christianity, by the mid-4th century, was not just the religion of the emperor, it was woven into the fabric of urban life. Its bishops were community leaders, its charity networks essential. Julian's project seemed less like tolerance and more like a top-down imposition of his own personal nostalgia. His policies often backfired, sometimes with dark irony. In one famous instance, to embarrass the Christians and showcase pagan virtue, he ordered the rebuilding of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, a project that quickly halted due to, according to accounts, mysterious fires and earthquakes, which Christians hailed as a miracle and pagans saw as bad luck. His reign lasted only 20 months. He died on a campaign against the Persians, struck by a spear, and his last words, as reported, were, "You have won, Galilean," a resigned acknowledgement to Jesus Christ. With his death, the project died. The army chose a solid Christian commander, Jovian, as the next emperor, and the restoration was instantly abandoned. This is what makes Julian's decision so haunting. It is history's greatest what if. What if he had lived another 20 years? Could he have successfully revived a vibrant pagan intellectual tradition? Or was the Christianization of the Roman world already too deep, too embedded in the social and administrative structures of the empire, to be undone by even the most determined emperor? Julian's brief, bright flame forces us to wonder whether a single visionary leader, armed with state power and a powerful idea, can ever truly redirect the deep currents of a civilization's soul, or if those currents ultimately determine the fate of every ruler who tries to swim against them. A king's anger can turn even the sea into a criminal. In the spring of 480 BCE, King Xerxes I of Persia stood on the Asian shore of the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating his empire from mainland Greece. His ambition was colossal, to lead the largest invasion force the world had yet seen across the water and finally crush the rebellious Greek city-states that had humbled his father at Marathon. His engineers had performed a miracle of logistics, lashing together hundreds of ships side by side to create 2 floating pontoon bridges across the turbulent strait. This was the literal pathway for his dreams of conquest. Then, a violent storm rose from the north. The winds and waves tore the elaborate bridges apart, scattering the ships and wrecking months of labor. Xerxes' reaction was not one of frustration, but of righteous, imperial fury. He ordered that the waters of the Hellespont be given 300 lashes with whips. He commanded that a pair of fetters, heavy iron chains used to shackle slaves, be thrown into the sea as a symbol of its enslavement. According to some accounts, he even sent men to brand the water with hot irons. Finally, he had the engineers who built the bridges beheaded for their failure. After this ritual punishment was complete, he ordered new, sturdier bridges built, and the massive army crossed without further incident. The controversy of this event is not about its military outcome, but about its staggering symbolism. The Greek historian Herodotus, our main source for the story, presented it as the ultimate act of hubris, the dangerous pride that invites divine retribution. Here was a mortal man, no matter how powerful, presuming to discipline a natural force as if it were a disobedient servant or a recalcitrant animal. To the Greek mind, the sea was the domain of gods like Poseidon, a primordial power that no human command could tame. Xerxes, by whipping it, was committing a profound sacrilege, placing his own royal authority above the laws of nature and the gods. It was the perfect narrative setup for his eventual defeat at Salamis and Plataea, a classic Greek moral lesson that arrogance precedes a fall. But we must step back from the Greek perspective. Was Xerxes truly a madman shouting at the waves? A more nuanced view suggests this was not an act of insanity, but a calculated performance of absolute power, a piece of political theater for a vast, multi-ethnic army. The destruction of the bridges was more than a logistical setback. It was a dire omen that could shatter the morale of superstitious troops before the campaign even began. By publicly punishing the sea, Xerxes was performing a symbolic exorcism of that bad omen. He was demonstrating to his soldiers that no force, natural or divine, could defy the King of Kings. The whips, the fetters, the brands, these were not tools of genuine correction, but props in a ritual of purification and dominance. He was transforming an act of nature into an act of disobedience, and then showcasing his power to correct it. The execution of the engineers served a dual purpose. It provided a human scapegoat for the failure and reinforced the deadly seriousness of his command. There is also the possibility that Herodotus, writing for a Greek audience that had miraculously survived Xerxes' invasion, embellished or crafted the story entirely as propaganda. It painted the Persian king as a barbaric, megalomaniacal tyrant, a foil to Greek rationality and piety. The image of a king whipping the sea was too poetically perfect, too neatly fitting the theme of hubris, to escape suspicion. It defined the Persian enemy as fundamentally other, as a civilization that did not understand the proper relationship between humanity and the cosmos. So, what are we witnessing? Is it the delusion of a god-king, a brilliant piece of psychological command, or a villain crafted by his enemies? Perhaps it is all three. Xerxes' decision reveals the terrifying logic of absolute power, where even the uncontrollable must be framed as a submissive subject. It asks us whether a leader can ever command loyalty by pretending to command the very elements, and what happens when the tide, inevitably, refuses to obey. Power could command the sea, but a different emperor believed it could be purchased with a single document. In the year 212, Emperor Caracalla issued a proclamation that would redefine what it meant to be Roman. It was called the Constitutio Antoniniana, and with one stroke, it granted full Roman citizenship to every free-born man living inside the vast borders of the empire. Millions of people, from Syrian merchants to Egyptian farmers to Gallic chieftains, woke up one day as Roman citizens. This was not a slow evolution, it was an overnight revolution in legal status. On the surface, it seems like a moment of stunning, progressive unity, the ultimate act of inclusion, but the motivations behind it were far more cynical, and the consequences far more complex than a simple gift of rights. Caracalla, ruling alongside his father Septimius Severus, had inherited an empire straining under financial and military pressure. The traditional citizen class, centered in Italy, was no longer large enough to fill the legions or pay the bills for an overstretched bureaucracy. The genius of the old system was that it created a ladder of aspiration, where provincial subjects could strive for the ultimate prize of citizenship. Caracalla simply removed the ladder and declared everyone had already reached the top. Why? The most pragmatic reason was money. Citizens paid certain inheritance and emancipation taxes that non-citizens did not. By making everyone a citizen, Caracalla instantly expanded his tax base dramatically. It was a brilliant, if blunt, fiscal maneuver. Furthermore, citizenship came with the obligation of military service. Now he could theoretically draft from a much wider pool to replenish his armies. There was also an ideological angle, a desire to forge a common identity in an increasingly fragmented realm, to make a Gaul and a Greek feel equally invested in the survival of Rome. But this grand unification sparked immediate and profound controversy. For the old Roman aristocracy, this was a catastrophe. Citizenship had been their cherished distinction, a mark of prestige and superiority earned through lineage or service. To see it handed out like cheap coin to people they considered barbarians felt like a deep cultural betrayal. The very value of their identity had been inflated into worthlessness. For the new citizens, the reality was often harsh. Yes, they now had the right to marry legally under Roman law, to make contracts, and to appeal to the emperor. But they were also now subject to those heavier citizen taxes they had previously avoided. For many, the edict felt less like an elevation and more like a new set of chains, a clever trick to extract more wealth from the provinces. The prestige was diluted, but the financial burden was very real. The long-term impact on Roman identity was irreversible. The unique glue that held the early empire together, the promise of becoming Roman, was gone. There was no higher status to aspire to within the system. Instead of creating unity, the edict may have accelerated a process of homogenization that stripped local identities without offering a compelling new one. The empire became a vast, flat administrative zone. The distinction between conqueror and conquered blurred until it vanished, and with it faded the old martial spirit and sense of shared destiny that had built the empire in the first place. The administration struggled under the new uniformity, trying to apply one legal standard to countless diverse cultures. Caligula, often remembered as a brutal and paranoid ruler, likely saw this as a masterstroke of control. But in trying to save the empire's finances, he may have unknowingly traded its soul for revenue, turning citizenship from a sacred ideal into a line item on a tax ledger. What does it mean when the ultimate privilege becomes a common obligation, and does broadening a circle always strengthen it, or can it sometimes erase the center entirely? Solomon's wisdom was legendary, a gift from God that made his name synonymous with judgment and understanding. His reign over Israel was a golden age of peace, prosperity, and monumental construction, crowned by the magnificent temple in Jerusalem, a house for God alone. Yet, the biblical account delivers a stunning contradiction. In his old age, King Solomon, the wisest of all men, made a decision that would unravel everything he had built. To please his many foreign wives, princesses from Egypt, Moab, Ammon, Edom, and elsewhere, he permitted something unthinkable. He built altars on the hills east of Jerusalem for the worship of their gods, for Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He allowed, and perhaps even participated in, rituals for these foreign deities within sight of the very temple dedicated to the God of Israel. This was not mere tolerance. It was state-sanctioned idolatry at the highest level. The controversy strikes at the core of Israel's identity. The first commandment was clear: "You shall have no other gods before me." Solomon's father, David, was a man after God's own heart, despite his flaws. Solomon's own covenant with God was conditional on obedience. By building these altars, Solomon didn't just break a rule. He shattered the foundational covenant that made Israel a nation set apart. The worship of Molech was particularly abhorrent, as it was said to involve child sacrifice, the ultimate betrayal of a community's future. So why would the wisest king commit such a foolish, spiritually catastrophic act? The biblical narrative presents it as a slow corruption, a failure of the heart. His many political marriages, each sealing an alliance with a neighboring kingdom, brought foreign influence directly into his palace. His love for these women, the text says, turned his heart away. His legendary wisdom, it seems, was no match for personal desire and political expediency. He sought to keep peace in his household and maintain his web of international alliances, but the cost was the soul of the nation. The controversy here is profound because it presents a tragic paradox. The very tools of Solomon's success, diplomatic marriages that secured peace, the wealth that funded grandeur, became the instruments of his spiritual downfall. The narrative frames this not as a simple mistake, but as the direct cause of divine judgment. Because of this decision, God tells Solomon that the kingdom will be torn from his son's hands. Only one tribe would remain for the sake of David. Upon Solomon's death, the United Kingdom of Israel splits irrevocably into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, a division from which it would never recover. The lesson is stark and deliberate. It is a story about the corrupting influence of absolute power and the peril of foreign entanglements that demand compromise of core principles. Solomon had everything: wisdom, wealth, peace, yet he traded the unique covenant with his God for the approval of his court and the comforts of syncretism. It asks a haunting question that resonates far beyond ancient Jerusalem. Can any amount of worldly wisdom or political savvy protect a leader from the slow, quiet corrosion of their own foundational values, especially when compromise wears the gentle face of love and diplomacy? The empire that granted citizenship to millions now found it could not protect its own borders. In the year 410, a message arrived from the distant imperial court of Ravenna, addressed to the cities of Britannia. It did not contain promises of reinforcements or a new governor. Instead, it carried a stark, simple instruction: look to your own defenses. Though the letter was signed in the name of the Western Roman Emperor Honorius, the decision represented a cold calculation made by his administration. The Roman legions, the very symbol of imperial power that had occupied Britain for nearly 4 centuries, were ordered not to return. The province was officially abandoned. To understand the gravity of this moment, you must feel the pressure crushing the Western Empire. Rome itself had been sacked by the Visigoths just 2 years prior. Barbarian armies swarmed across Gaul and Spain. The imperial government, now based in Ravenna for its marshy defenses, was fighting for its very survival. Resources, soldiers, and gold were desperately needed closer to the heart of what was left. Britannia, at the very edge of the known world across a treacherous channel, was a luxury the crumbling empire could no longer afford. It was a distant, expensive province, perpetually requiring garrison troops to guard against Pictish raids from the north and seaborne attacks from Irish and Saxon pirates. The order to withdraw was not a sudden betrayal, but the final act in a slow-motion retreat. For years, ambitious generals had been pulling troops from Britain to fight in continental civil wars. The province had already been left to fend for itself in all but name. Honorius's letter was merely the official acknowledgement of a reality that had already taken root. The controversy surrounding this decision is the stuff of national origin stories. For generations of historians and storytellers, this was the moment the light of Rome was extinguished in Britain. The withdrawal of the legions and the administrative framework they supported meant the end of centralized government, of the complex tax system, of the maintenance of roads and aqueducts, of the monetary economy. Towns that had thrived on trade with the empire began to shrink and crumble. The sophisticated villa culture of the Romano-British elite collapsed. The decision is seen as the direct catalyst for the Anglo-Saxon migrations and settlements that followed, as Germanic tribes, perhaps initially invited as mercenaries, stepped into the power vacuum and gradually established their own kingdoms. It marks, in the traditional view, the beginning of the so-called Dark Ages in Britain, a plunge into political fragmentation, economic decline, and cultural isolation. But was it truly a catastrophic failure of duty, or a brutal act of necessary triage? From the perspective of Ravenna, it was likely the latter. The empire was bleeding out. Sending legions on a perilous voyage to secure a far-off island, while Italy itself was under threat, would have been strategic madness. It was a choice between losing a limb or losing the heart. The administration chose to sacrifice the limb in a desperate attempt to save the core. They were practicing a form of imperial triage, abandoning the most distant and difficult-to-hold territories to consolidate forces around Italy. In this light, the letter was not cowardice, but heartbreaking pragmatism. The other side of the controversy, however, focuses on the human and civilizational cost of that pragmatism. The Romano-British people had been loyal subjects for generations. They had adopted Roman law, language, and customs. They had paid their taxes and supplied soldiers for the army. The imperial bargain was protection in exchange for allegiance. By withdrawing the legions, Rome broke that ancient contract. It left millions of people, who considered themselves Roman, utterly defenseless against rising threats. The decision did not just withdraw soldiers, it withdrew the very idea of civilization as they knew it. The resulting chaos and invasion led to centuries of warfare, cultural displacement, and the near-total erasure of Roman life from much of the island. So, do we judge the emperor in Ravenna for saving what he could? Or do we condemn him for abandoning those who depended on his most basic promise? The empty forts along Hadrian's Wall, once manned by soldiers from across the empire, now stood silent. The decision to look away from Britain forced a people to find a new identity in the darkness. proving that sometimes the most controversial act of an empire is not what it conquers, but what it chooses to leave behind. The final letter from Rome was a surrender, but in Alexandria, a queen still played for the ultimate throne. After the assassination of Julius Caesar, the Mediterranean world was a chessboard of shifting loyalties, and Cleopatra VII saw her next move with chilling clarity. She would not be a client queen waiting for Rome's next command. She would become the power behind it. Her decision was to forge an unbreakable alliance with Mark Antony, one of the three men, the triumvirs, now ruling Rome's fractured republic. This was not merely a political treaty. It became a legendary partnership, both romantic and strategic, that aimed to redraw the map of the world. Together, they envisioned a new Hellenistic Roman Empire centered in the east, with Alexandria as its glittering capital. In a breathtaking ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria, Antony declared Cleopatra the Queen of Kings, and he bestowed vast territories, from Syria to Armenia, upon her and their children, Caesarion, Alexander Helios, and Cleopatra Selene. To Cleopatra, this was the restoration of her ancestral Ptolemaic glory, expanded beyond the wildest dreams of her forebears. She was not just securing Egypt's independence, she was positioning her dynasty to co-rule the entire Roman East. From the marble halls of Rome, however, this partnership looked like something else entirely, a monstrous betrayal. Through the masterful propaganda of Antony's rival, Octavian, Cleopatra was painted not as a sovereign ally, but as a sinister Oriental seductress who had ensnared a noble Roman general with witchcraft and decadence. The donations were not a diplomatic arrangement, they were an act of treason. Antony was giving away Roman land, conquered by Roman blood, to a foreign queen and her half-breed children. Octavian skillfully framed the conflict not as a Roman civil war, but as a patriotic war for the soul of Rome against an Eastern despot. He read Antony's will, allegedly seized from the Temple of Vesta, to the Senate, where it detailed his wishes to be buried in Alexandria beside Cleopatra. This was the final proof, in Roman eyes, that Antony had forsaken his homeland. Cleopatra's gamble had made her the perfect villain for Octavian's narrative, transforming a complex power struggle into a simple, moral crusade. The controversy of Cleopatra's choice is the razor's edge between visionary ambition and catastrophic overreach. She bet everything on Antony, believing their combined forces could defeat Octavian and secure a dual monarchy that would last for centuries. She financed his campaigns with Egyptian grain and treasure, turning her kingdom into the bank for his ambitions. But in tying Egypt's fate so completely to one Roman faction, she made the ultimate conflict with Octavian inevitable and unwinnable. The decisive confrontation came at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BCE. As the fleets clashed, a pivotal moment unfolded. Cleopatra's squadron of 60 ships, stationed behind the main line, suddenly hoisted their sails and broke through the combat, heading for open sea. Antony, seeing her retreat, abandoned his own commanding ship and followed her. The rest of his fleet, leaderless and demoralized, surrendered. The escape from Actium sealed their doom. Whether it was a prearranged signal in a failing battle or a panicked flight, it was portrayed by Octavian as the ultimate act of cowardice and feminine weakness, a man led to ruin by a woman's fear. Within a year, Octavian's legions were at the gates of Alexandria. Facing capture and the inevitable humiliation of being paraded through Rome in chains, Cleopatra made her final, definitive choice. According to the ancient accounts, she arranged for a poisonous asp, the symbol of divine royalty, to be delivered to her in a basket of figs. She allowed the serpent to bite her, choosing death on her own terms. With her died the last pharaoh of Egypt. Octavian, now Augustus, annexed Egypt as his personal province, ending 3 centuries of Ptolemaic rule. Cleopatra's alliance with Antony was the last, magnificent roll of the dice for an independent Hellenistic kingdom. It was a gamble for supreme power that failed, but in its failure, it created a legend so potent it would forever overshadow the conqueror who defeated her. She dared to imagine a world where Egypt was not a Roman province, but Rome's equal partner, and for that vision, she paid the ultimate price, leaving us to wonder if the greater folly was her ambition, or the world that could not allow it to exist. The suicide of Cleopatra marked the end of a dynasty, But in Rome, an emperor would soon stage a spectacle that blurred the line between ruler and slave. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, spent his reign defending the frontiers with stoic duty. His son and successor, Commodus, inherited a stable empire, but he saw the throne not as a burden of service, but as a stage for his darkest fantasies. He made a decision that horrified the Roman elite. He would not just watch the games, he would star in them. Emperor Commodus entered the gladiatorial arena, fighting in public for the adulation of the mob. This was not a one-time stunt, but a regular, obsessive performance. He would appear in the Colosseum, dressed as the demigod Hercules, complete with a lion skin and a club. The matches were, of course, elaborately rigged. His opponents were given blunt weapons or were crippled beforehand, ensuring his victory was both guaranteed and bloody. He also delighted in slaughtering exotic animals from a safe platform, claiming hundreds of kills in a single day, a display not of bravery, but of staged, industrial-scale butchery. To the Senate and the traditional aristocracy, this was an unforgivable degradation of the imperial office. Gladiators were infames, people without legal or social standing, often slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war. For the emperor, the father of the country, to willingly place himself among them was to drag the entire concept of Roman authority into the dirt. The emperor was supposed to embody dignitas, a gravitas, and separation from the vulgar crowd. By becoming its main entertainment, Commodus shattered that sacred boundary, transforming the state's highest magistrate into a common performer. So why would he do it? The motivations reveal a dangerous cocktail of psychology and politics. Commodus seemed to genuinely believe in his own divine persona as Hercules reborn, a demigod condescending to fight mortals. This was megalomania on a public scale, but there was also a shrewd, if twisted, political calculation. The games were the opiate of the Roman populace. By starring in them, Commodus bypassed the Senate and the army, appealing directly to the people for his legitimacy and love. He bought their loyalty with blood and spectacle, creating a cult of personality built on sensational violence rather than competent governance. He paid himself an exorbitant sum from the imperial treasury for each appearance, a symbolic act that showed he valued the arena more than the business of ruling. His decision epitomized the decay of the Principate, the system Augustus had carefully built. The emperor was now a performer, the state his supporting cast, and governance a mere sideshow to the main event in the arena. He drained the treasury to fund his spectacles while neglecting administration. He purged the government of anyone who showed competence or dissent, surrounding himself with sycophants who encouraged his delusions. The controversy was not just about disgrace, it was about the complete inversion of the Roman order. The ultimate judgment came from those whose power he had mocked. In the year 192, a conspiracy formed within his own inner circle, including his mistress and his praetorian prefect. They had him strangled in his bath by a champion wrestler, a fitting end for a man who had turned rule into a violent sport. Commodus' gladiatorial career was more than an eccentricity. It was a symptom of a system where absolute power, with no check on its fantasies, could reduce the mighty machinery of Rome to a theatrical prop for one man's desperate need to be worshipped. The arena's spectacle of power turned inward, but in a Babylonian palace, a king would stage a feast that invited a judgment far more terrifying. The final king of Babylon, a man named Belshazzar, threw a lavish banquet for 1,000 of his nobles. The empire was under siege, with the armies of Cyrus the Great camped outside the city's mighty walls, but inside, the king sought to display his unshakable confidence. It was here he made a decision that would become the ultimate parable of hubris. To elevate the celebration, he commanded that the sacred gold and silver vessels, taken as plunder by his father Nebuchadnezzar from the temple in Jerusalem decades before, be brought from the treasury. These were not ordinary cups and bowls. They were objects consecrated for the worship of a single god, items that had stood in the Holy of Holies. Belshazzar ordered them filled with wine, and he, his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. As they drank, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, the mute idols of Babylon. The act was a deliberate, double-edged sacrilege. It was a boast of ownership, showing that even the most holy relics of a conquered people were now mere party favors for the Babylonian court. More profoundly, it was a theological insult, using vessels dedicated to the God of Israel to toast the power of Babylonian idols. It was the ultimate expression of imperial pride, a belief that his power was so absolute it could mock the divine without consequence. Then, in the midst of the revelry, a supernatural terror interrupted the feast. The fingers of a human hand appeared and began writing on the plaster wall of the palace, near the lampstand, where the light shone brightest. The king watched as the hand wrote. His festive pride turned to dread, his limbs went weak, and his knees knocked together. He called for his wise men, enchanters, and diviners, promising royal robes and a chain of gold to anyone who could read the writing and interpret it. But none of the king's sages could understand the words. Finally, at the urging of the Queen Mother, the prophet Daniel, an exile from Judah known for his wisdom, was brought before the trembling king. Daniel, refusing the rewards, delivered a searing indictment. He reminded Belshazzar that he had known the story of his fathers, humbling by the same God of Jerusalem, yet he had not humbled his own heart. "You have exalted yourself against the Lord of heaven," Daniel declared. "You had the vessels of his house brought before you, and you and your nobles drank wine from them, praising gods of silver and gold, which cannot see or hear or know." Then he interpreted the cryptic words, meaning God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, meaning you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Parsin, meaning your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The judgment was immediate and irrevocable. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was killed. The biblical account states that Darius the Mede took the kingdom, fulfilling the prophecy written on the wall. The controversy of this feast is not about a military blunder or a failed policy, but about a spiritual arrogance so profound it triggers its own instantaneous downfall. It is a story crafted to deliver a moral lesson with the force of a thunderclap. The vessels were not just stolen property, they were a tangible link to a covenant. By defiling them, Belshazzar was not just disrespecting a foreign god, he was challenging the moral order of the universe itself. The writing on the wall was not a cryptic puzzle, but a direct audit, a final balance sheet presented by a power he had chosen to mock. The story's power lies in its terrifying cause and effect. The feast did not cause the Persian conquest. The Persians were already at the gates. But in the narrative, the king's sacrilege is the moment the last thread of divine forbearance snaps. His decision transforms a geopolitical event into a divine judgment, making his death not just a casualty of war, but the direct consequence of his own blasphemous pride. It asks a haunting question that echoes far beyond ancient Babylon. When a leader, in a moment of supreme confidence, treats the sacred as trivial, are they celebrating their power, or are they unknowingly writing their own final verdict on the wall? A king's feast invited divine judgment, but an emperor's edict would try to command the very soul of his empire. In the year 303, the Roman Emperor Diocletian, architect of the Tetrarchy, a system of 4 rulers designed to save the empire from collapse, issued a series of decrees that would unleash the final, most systematic storm of violence against a growing faith. This was the Great Persecution. The first edict was brutally specific. Christian churches were to be torn down. Their sacred scriptures were to be seized and publicly burned. All clergy were to be arrested, and every Christian, from senator to soldier to servant, was ordered to offer sacrifice to the traditional Roman gods. Refusal meant the loss of legal rights, property, and for many, their lives. Subsequent edicts escalated the terror, ordering the imprisonment of entire Christian communities and later, that all subjects must sacrifice or face execution. The machinery of the Roman state, renowned for its laws and order, was now meticulously tuned for religious eradication. But why would Diocletian, a pragmatic reformer who had stabilized a crumbling empire, launch such a devastating campaign? The motivation was not simple hatred, but a profound, state-centered fear. Diocletian had just restructured the entire government. His tetrarchy was a fragile new order built on loyalty to the emperors and the traditional Roman gods who blessed their rule. Christians, however, swore their ultimate allegiance to a heavenly kingdom. They refused to participate in public sacrifices that were seen as pledges of loyalty to the state. To Diocletian, this was not a private belief, it was political sedition. In his view, the Christians' rejection of the old gods endangered the Pax Deorum, the peace with the gods, upon which the safety of the empire depended. Their very existence was a crack in the foundation of his grand restoration. He sought religious unity not for its own sake, but as the essential glue for his political masterpiece. The controversy of this persecution lies in its catastrophic failure. The campaign was massive, lasting nearly a decade in some regions. It produced horrific stories of martyrdom, from believers thrown to beasts in the arena to others who endured torture rather than burn a pinch of incense. Yet, the violence achieved the opposite of its intent. Instead of crushing the Christian spirit, it forged it in fire. The stories of martyrs spread, inspiring admiration even among pagans. The church, forced underground, became more organized and resilient. The persecution also proved impossible to enforce uniformly across the vast empire. Some regional rulers applied the edicts half-heartedly, while others, like Diocletian's co-emperor in the west, Constantius, largely avoided bloodshed. The greatest irony came with Diocletian's own retirement. Just a few years after the first edict, weary and ill, he abdicated and retreated to his palace, famously tending his cabbages. His successors almost immediately began reversing his policies. The final nail came from within his own household. Constantine, son of Constantius, would soon take the throne and issue the Edict of Milan, granting Christians full tolerance. The Great Persecution, intended to purify the empire for a new age, instead became a tragic, futile exercise in coercion. It demonstrated a terrifying truth, that even the most powerful state cannot command the human conscience, and that attempts to do so often strengthen the very conviction they aim to destroy. Diocletian wanted to build an empire that would last 1,000 years, but his most severe decree only succeeded in proving that faith, once rooted in the heart, is a force no edict can ever truly erase. The ultimate price for an emperor's failure was not just death, but the total erasure of his dignity. In the year 260, Emperor Valerian made a fateful choice to personally lead a massive Roman army into the eastern provinces, aiming to crush the rising power of the Sasanian Persian Empire and its brilliant king, Shapur I. This was not an unusual decision for an emperor, but in the chaotic 3rd century, it became a catastrophic gamble. The Roman Empire was already reeling from invasions, plagues, and a rapid succession of short-lived rulers. Valerian, an elderly senator who had risen to the throne amidst the turmoil, needed a decisive victory to secure his authority and save the East. He marched his legions to confront Shapur near the city of Edessa. The campaign quickly turned into a disaster. Plagued by supply problems and a devastating outbreak of plague within his own ranks, Valerian found his army weakened and trapped. Seeking a parley to negotiate a withdrawal, he made his final, fatal error. He walked into a trap. Shapur, showing no regard for diplomatic custom, seized the Roman emperor during the supposed negotiations. Valerian was taken prisoner, and his leaderless army, surrounded and demoralized, was utterly defeated or captured. The event was unthinkable. For over 500 years, since the Republic's earliest days, a Roman emperor had never been captured alive on the battlefield. Emperors died fighting, or by assassination, but they were never led in chains before a foreign king. It was the ultimate humiliation, not just for Valerian, but for the very idea of Rome. The controversy swirls around his leadership. Was he a brave but unlucky commander, overwhelmed by circumstance and betrayal? Or was he an incompetent strategist whose poor planning led his army into a fatal corner, making him easy prey for a more cunning foe? The stark truth was that his decision to campaign personally, without securing a clear advantage, had turned the living embodiment of Roman power into its greatest symbol of weakness. The shocking aftermath, steeped in Persian propaganda and Roman horror, only deepened the disgrace. Ancient sources, particularly Persian rock carvings and later Roman historians, tell of a fate worse than death. They claim King Shapur used the elderly emperor as a human footstool to mount his horse, a visceral image of absolute subjugation. Then, after Valerian died in captivity, The stories say his body was treated with unparalleled indignity. His skin was allegedly flayed, stuffed with straw or dung, and displayed in a Persian temple as a permanent trophy, a grim mockery of a man who once commanded the world's greatest empire. Whether every gruesome detail is factual or symbolic, the message was searingly clear. Rome could be not only defeated, but desecrated. Valerian's capture was more than a military loss, it was the ultimate failure of an emperor's sacred duty. The emperor was the pater patrii, the father and protector of the state. His person was inviolable. By becoming a prisoner, Valerian transformed from protector into a vulnerability, a living testament to Roman fragility. This single event became the starkest symbol of the crisis of the 3rd century, a period where the empire nearly shattered. It exposed a terrifying truth, that the throne could be occupied by a man whose poor judgment could leave the empire not just leaderless, but permanently shamed. In the end, Valerian's decision did not just cost him his freedom. It cost Rome its aura of invincibility, forcing the empire to stare into the abyss and wonder if anything, even its emperor, was truly sacred anymore. From the humiliating capture of an emperor to the burning of books, we have crossed a landscape of power where a single choice could echo for millennia. Each of these 25 controversial decisions, whether born of cold calculation or blinding passion, reveals the terrifying weight of command in the ancient world. We witnessed acts of cultural annihilation, like Qin Shi Huang burning history itself, or Theodosius silencing the Olympic Games. We saw spiritual revolutions from Akhenaten's single sun god to Julian's desperate pagan revival. We observed personal folly curdle into national disaster, from Caligula's war on the sea to Commodus's gladiatorial delusions, and we navigated strategic gambles that redefined empires, from Constantine's embrace of Christianity to Cleopatra's fatal alliance with Rome. Beneath this staggering diversity, common threads emerge like fractures in marble. Every leader faced the immense, isolating pressure of absolute power, a force that could distort judgment and magnify fear. We see the eternal clash between tradition and innovation, between preserving a sacred past and forging a dangerous new future. And perhaps most hauntingly, we trace the fine line between visionary leadership and catastrophic hubris, a line that Nero, Xerxes, and Belshazzar each crossed in their own spectacular fashion. These were not monsters in a vacuum, but human beings making impossible choices with the fate of civilizations in their hands. Their decisions, controversial and consequential, built the world we inherited, setting precedents for law, faith, art, and power that still shape our lives today. They offer us timeless lessons about the ethics of leadership, the price of progress, and the chain of cause and effect that binds every ruler to their people. History does not simply judge them, it asks us to understand them. So now, we turn the question to you. Which of these 25 decisions did you find the most shocking, or the most difficult to judge? Was any leader truly justified in their actions given the pressures they faced? Debate your thoughts in the comments below. If this journey into the minds of ancient leaders captivated you, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. The past is full of stories waiting to be uncovered, and your curiosity